Sorry,
It's the first thing that the live show will hear.
Every time I'm not speaking, I'm going to mute myself because my mom refuses to not.
Okay. Right. So, hey guys, welcome to the live show for Feast of Crows, the fourth book in the Song of Ice and Fire series. Cody isn't with us today because she's not well, and Zaf is shy, so she's shown us a pretty picture of her book, but this will essentially just be a live show discussing the events of this book and our thoughts on it. Now, I should have asked you guys before, but are we going to do anything about the show at the end? Because we covered. Is there anything that anybody wants to say about this book that ties into later seasons of the show?
I guess we could talk about maybe like how different it is, or like how we feel about the connections with the show, maybe. Like,
okay.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
So we'll start off talking about the book, and then we will let you guys know if we are going to be moving on to spoilers for season 5 onwards of the TV show. So there will be no spoilers at the beginning for seasons 1 to 4 of the show. And what, did I do that right? No, there'll be no spoilers starting off with for seasons 5 to 8 of the show. And then we'll talk about that later on. So first off, we'll just go through everybody and give the ratings for the book. So I guess I'm first, which is awkward because I have not managed to finish this book yet. I struggled a lot. So I'm up to page 520, but I have seen the show, so I know all of the main plot points. But I will be letting the other guys lead the discussion on any plot points they want to discuss that I didn't make it up to. I guess Rachel's next.
Yeah, so I did complete the book this morning. So I think that I'm like along with everybody else who like finishing this book right at the end second. But I gave this book 4 stars for similar reasons as I've given like all of them 4 stars, which I'll probably get to later. But this is like the first time I'm reading my way through it. And of course, I've watched this series a few times round, apart from like the last one. I'm sad that we don't have like the final books. It's difficult saying goodbye to this after Dance with Dragons and having to like wait however long. But yeah, I am eager. I'm hoping that George R.R. Martin pulls his finger out and gets some books written for us before we all die, or he does.
Yeah, there is that. Gav?
Well, so I finished it like literally just before the live. I really struggled as well as Becca, and I gave it 3 stars. Like I did enjoy it more than A Clash of Kings. So my ratings have gone like 5, 3, 4, 5, 3. So like I have like this love-hate relationship with like these books. To be honest, like with A Feast for Crows, I felt like we'll probably get into like a lot of these like main things, but like what I had like the most issue with is it was like such a hard shift in like tone, like contrast between like action and the exposition that was in this one. So like I felt like too much happened in the last one that this one felt a bit boring compared to it. So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Ashley?
Oh, sorry, I'm just over here in my own.
We've all moved because of Rachel. So it's
Hi, I'm Ashley. My channel is Don't Have a Degree in Reading. I rated this. I pretty much guaranteed like to rate them all 5 stars. When I first read the series, I hated this book. I thought it was boring, but upon rereads, I actually really, really enjoy this book. I think that I enjoy the perspectives, most of the perspectives, because, you know, I'm a big Jaime Lannister fan. And although we all love to hate Cersei, I love reading her chapters because they're just so interesting to see what she's doing and how she's dealing with everything. I really liked it.
And Zaf?
Hello. My channel name is The Psychonics, and I gave this one 4 stars. This is literally the only one I would give 4 stars. And it's not because Daenerys isn't in this one. It's just because I felt like, you know what, we're going to talk about when we get to it. But basically, it wasn't my favorite. I think it was a bit too, like, kind of as Ashley said, it wasn't as fun as the others. It kind of felt, or was it Gav? Oh my God, I've already got confused. God damn it. But I just felt like it was too, there was too much of an amalgamation of political issues, but they weren't as intriguing as they could have been. And just the lack of supernatural elements and the fantasy elements in this book entirely just wasn't as fun. Like, there were elements, but they weren't really fully explored, so I didn't find that as fun. But yeah, there you go.
Okay. So, for the book overall, as a whole, I thought that Like, as Zaf has said, and as Ashley said the first time that she read it, it's a lot slower, and Gav touched on this as well, than Storm of Swords. It's a lot more like Clash of Kings, but I'm finding it so far a lot more interesting than Clash of Kings was. Like, Clash of Kings was just a huge drag, but I'm generally interested in what is happening in A Feast for Crows, even though it is a lot slower. But what I've been taking from this so far is that the main theme of the book seems to be transition. So we have Arya, who is transitioning into an assassin for the House of, what's it called? The House of
White and black.
Yeah, White and Black.
White.
I always want to say the House of Many Faces, but that's the god. Then we have Sansa, who is kind of undercover as Elaine. Jaime is away from Cersei, and he seems to be, his morals, like we saw this a lot in the show, his morals are sort of developing. And I'm not sure how I can like work the transition thing into Brienne, although she does always struggle with her identity, just generally. And then we have the Iron Islands, where everybody's kind of in uproar and people are fighting for power. And some people don't want to be king, but they're trying to be anyway. And then we have Asha, who is trying to be the first queen. So what do you guys think about the themes?
I agree with that, because I definitely felt at the very start of like A Feast for Crows, because it is like following on from Storm of Swords, and no, A Feast for Crows, Storm of Swords. It's following on from Storm of Swords, where so much happened that if these characters didn't sort of react in sort of real time, which is I think what I struggled with to begin with, is how slow it started to move from that. But like, I can totally say why it happened, because so much happened. And say, for instance, with like Cersei's early chapters, I think in her first one, doesn't she like come across like Tywin's body, and like she sees his body, she sees his pubic hair, things like that. So it's like we have like, yeah, it's like not very nice, but like we have this sort of reaction to what happened, all the things that happened in book 3. So it was like a very kind of natural, slow progression from such like huge momentum to kind of really like calm down and see how they dealt with that. So with Cersei, it was like, you know, have we had Cersei as a main character before, like point of view character? This is her first one, right?
No, it's
So,
Cersei's first.
yeah. So like with her, it was like really interesting to see sort of how she dealt with everything that happened. Because if I was her, I would have had a breakdown. She lost her son, she lost her dad, like all in one book. So like, even though she is like not a very nice person, you can't help but like kind of understand, like with her point of view, what she's gone through. So that way, with her dealing with what's happened, you kind of understand her progression throughout the book, because so she gains weight, she becomes like a bit of an alcoholic, and you know, like this like whole sort of thing. That was really interesting to watch happen. But yeah, as I say, I've got a love-hate relationship with this, because I also found it really boring. So it's like I don't know why, but I don't really want a lot of action to happen, but because so much happened in Storm of Swords, that when I started reading this one, as you said, with a theme of like transition and change and stuff, it was really hard for me to wrap my head around how slow it was going. So yeah, I was kind of like, I don't know, I don't know how to like articulate my feelings with this one.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
I was talking to Becca about this a couple of days ago, and I actually liked this book as much as I liked the first book, because so therefore it was actually the one that I preferred above all the others that we've read so far, because I thought that we were starting so many new things, and like Becca kind of touched on it, it was like the transitioning. So there are like loads of new stories and people are changing and new things are happening. So for me, that kept it quite fresh. And we're seeing this change in so many relationship dynamics. Cersei and Jaime's relationship is completely different in this book than any other. I mean, she's disgusted by him, and she is also questioning like herself, and she obviously, we're getting her perspective for the first time, so we're getting her inner dialogue. But there was that side of things. There was also Arya, who's on a completely different island, and she's got a whole new story arc waiting for her. Then you've got Sansa, who is basically now just Elaine, and her storyline there. And is she like a mother to Robert, or is she like a wife to be to Robert? Like what, that side of things. I just thought that there was so much new. And obviously we got the new perspectives there. So that's what kind of kept it fresh for me. And I read this really quickly. I mean, I read it within a week. It was just there were some chapters that I just kind of breezed over because I thought I'm not going to get anything from it. And if I don't think I'm going to get anything from a chapter, I'll read like the last paragraph of that chapter. And George will put something in the last paragraph if it's important. Other than that, it's not important. Like I could just completely skip it. And for that, sometimes I do think that he just fills in a little bit too much and doesn't get around to the plot enough. But that's some people's perfect cup of tea when it comes to this kind of book. They want that heavy, rich world building. But I think that all of us maybe were of the mindset that we wanted, like, especially like Gavin and Becca, we maybe wanted something more to happen within this than just those extra chapters that were just like, okay, that's not going to be conducive to this live show.
But at the same time as well, like so much happening, so much swords, I didn't like that. Like I wanted things to happen like plot-wise, but I didn't like how much he crammed in there and those like action-wise. And again, it's why I have this love-hate relationship with this book. I don't think he has the perfect balance between having these big pivotal moments and spacing it out between these like really characteristic, like character-driven stories and stuff. So I find it really hard to. I just find it really hard. Like this is my first time reading this series, and I'm struggling. I am struggling, but I'm enjoying it, but I'm struggling. Sorry.
Okay, as to like what both of you have said, like Gavin, you definitely have a valid point. There is such a major shift between there being so much being put into the story, so many major plot points, to essentially redacting so much to a much slower paced book. But I feel like in this one, when you kind of look at the sphere in which the book exists, like we are exploring roughly half of the perspectives that we normally would be. We're missing out major characters and those character progressions, but I'm pretty sure that originally George wanted to do a flash forward like a few years ahead, so all the characters would age up. But then he wrote into that, he didn't like that, or so he decided to. But then he realized he would have to write too many flashback scenes. That's why he decided to do it this way, where he has this book and then the other book, and there's split perspectives to get all of that information, all of that growth out. And that's why. Yeah. So when you take that into account, it doesn't necessarily mean that. I'm not trying to apologize for his decisions or anything. It doesn't necessarily forgive him if you don't like it, but I feel like it does make it a bit more understandable in the sense that he's trying to show that slow shift in how all these characters are growing into like, you know, these different kinds of people. And so Becca has a very, very valid point. And there definitely has to be something said about the duality of the entire situation, where you've got these impactful plots that are far more implicit. Like I feel like the book itself is so dependent on the more realistic and political intrigue and the social aspects of the story, as like it is a conversation about the leaders, but it's the thing that most of the world would be privy to. Meanwhile, when we look at the perspectives that we're missing, we are missing the big players and the ones that will have the most major impact in the time coming. You know, there's this fear that we as the reader have because we've been privy to all of those things, but people of the Westeros wouldn't have, because the book itself is literally, I feel like, full of the Westerosi population's worries and their ignorance and being privy to the stuff that, you know, that affects them, but not the stuff that they're ignorant to, if that makes sense. At least that's what I mainly like took away from it.
Yeah, kind of leading on from what Zaf just said, I find it very kind of realistic as well, but how slow the information is traveling. Like for the first at least 100 to 200 pages of the book, and I think even where I'm up to on 520 pages, not everybody is aware that Tywin is dead because of how slow the information is traveling. Like for most of the beginning of the book, everybody's worried about Tywin. I think the Sand Snakes and everybody in Dawn keep saying that Tywin is going to give them the head of the mountain as revenge for the Red Viper's death. And yeah, it's interesting. It's realistic because normally in books you will find that it will just skip and like all the characters know everything, even though realistically it would be like this, where you have to send a raven to send information, and they take a long time to get where they're going if they're traveling from like King's Landing to Dawn, etc.
Like what definitely needs to be acknowledged is what I feel like the book heavily puts a focus on is how information itself is a currency. And so what you do with that currency and where you deposit it and when you deposit that, it is a very big player in essentially, you know, the power dynamics between people. Peter Baelish is rich full of this information currency, and the way he deposits it when he decides to like give up information, I feel like is such intrigue, like it's so intriguing. And it's funny that you also mention Tywin, because I feel like he's such a huge player, and when like the book's name itself is A Feast for Crows, we know so many people are dead, but I feel like it's a feast of obviously literally so many people are dead, but also this feast of knowledge, you know, kind of getting that feeling, you know, crows giving information, maybe that's ravens, but still you get my idea. Birds, I don't know.
Anybody have anything to add on the themes? No? Okay, so moving on to some of the characters. I know some of the most interesting ones in this book were Cersei and Jaime. Cersei especially because it was her first time being an actual character perspective. I personally found it interesting, and this ties into the argument that we always seem to have a little bit regarding whether the A Song of Ice and Fire books are sexist or feminist. Because I found that Cersei's decisions in this book played into what everybody expected her to do. Because George R.R. Martin has this thing where it kind of sucks that women have to suffer to then become strong and powerful towards the end of the series. What I found with this is that Cersei is grasping for power. She's obviously dealing with a lot of emotions from all of the trauma that she suffered recently, but she's paranoid, she's desperate. Everybody's advising her to do things, and she's making stupid decisions. The part that I've just read is where she has agreed to let the religious militia like reinstate, which ultimately spells her downfall. And it's one of those things where if she had been listening to people around her, if she didn't think that she knew better than everybody else, then this wouldn't have happened. But I'm not sure how I actually feel about it, but it's just like we have this female character who has an opportunity to be in power, and George R.R. Martin is writing her where the men are right, and they're right that a woman shouldn't be in power because she's doing everything wrong.
Does that not seem really, what's the word, like, kind of like accurate of what would happen though? At the end of the day, she's never had the power that her brother has had. And she constantly talks about how if she was a man, she would have been given a sword. She would have been the king's hand. She was the elder twin, I think. And she talks about that she would have been given the same opportunities. So then she's always been fighting back against it. And then when she gets power, she wants to hold it completely for herself. And I think that George R.R. Martin is doing probably what any human, unfortunately, does in this scenario. And it's kind of an immature way of looking at it. It's like when a child suddenly gets independence and then they don't listen to their parents' advice at all until they make a load of mistakes and they're like, yes, you actually do know what you're talking about. So I think it's quite apt in terms of like human behavior, but it's not great in terms of like a feminist theme.
I feel like with Cersei though, she will have spent a lot of time in the background. Like we see the development throughout the series and also in the show of how she's always been pushed into the shadows, but she's still there and she's still listening to what is going on. And yes, she may not have been military trained and she may not know the ins and outs of warfare, but politics she should be pretty good at, because she's either been in the councils or she's been around. And this is a world where people think that women can't retain information, so they will just talk freely with women in the room. So she does have all of this information, and I feel like the decisions that she's making are ones that she is capable to make. They're not like war strategy or anything like that, where she has completely been closed away from. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. It's just something that I've been noticing as I have been reading her chapters, because I was really excited for Cersei, because as you guys know, I do really like Cersei. I prefer Cersei to Sansa in general, even though they're quite similar. But yeah, she's quite paranoid, quite desperate, which is understandable. But then I don't like how she's making all of these really obvious mistakes and she just won't listen to anybody.
Yeah, well, I guess that's how was a really good reason why George R.R. Martin chose to have chapters from her perspective, because even though like the decisions you said that she made weren't like obviously spell her downfall and stuff, you kind of get a look at why she does a lot of it. So like even though like it comes across as really like stupid what she does, we understand, because like there was this prophecy, wasn't there, where apparently someone who was going to be much younger and beautiful, who was gonna like. So we understand her fear. So like we know that she it's like she probably thinks it's like Marjorie at like one point, like, oh, maybe she's gonna be the one who spells my downfall. She doesn't realize the irony, that the fact that she's gonna bring her own downfall. So like we get a look into her decisions, which is like probably one of the reasons why I like A Feast for Crows and gave it 3 stars instead of like 2, say. Is because I really enjoyed like her perspectives. I love seeing things from her angle, but like a lot of the decisions she made, like say when she sends the men up and she's planning on having them kill John at the wall kind of thing, it's all very personal. It's all very it comes across as very malicious rather than strategic. So I do think, like, I don't know what George R.R. was playing at, trying to make Cersei seem like such a character of sensibility rather than somebody who was like thinking tactfully. But she was always saying, like, Cersei's always saying, oh, I'm just waiting for Tommen to get into power. So like she kind of just like keeping the seat warm for him at the minute. So it's like, does she have like any like real like implication other than like what she's like doing in this moment? So like, does she like have any 2 feet to stand on, really? Like, I don't know. So it's like, yeah, I was just really like, I think Cersei was probably my favorite part of A Feast, of course, because of those decisions, and a lot of them are very human for her, because she is very, she holds grudges. She's very personal, and she will fight dirty, which, as you see, happens, but it backfires so majorly. So yeah, and that's what I love about Cersei as well, is that she is not like, she is like quite powerful in her own way, but she makes mistakes, but she makes them in a way that she doesn't realize that she's doing it. So yeah, that's what that's what I like Cersei for. I like that she's not perfect.
Which is completely understandable. And honestly, like, I feel like, you know, we're talking about Cersei's representation. I feel like there is definitely a conversation that can be had about our whole feminist perspective, but I'll touch on that in a moment. But first, as to what you're saying, Gavin, it definitely, like, she does make some incredibly stupid decisions, and you know, a few people would have been able to spot them from a mile away now. But I think when we obviously analyze Cersei's characters with what we already know from her, and we're finally seeing from her perspective, Cersei has essentially always been put in a position where she has to follow. So any kind of power that she can have, she tries to glean from the most she can, you know? So, you know, this idea that she's continuously thinking about what she's going to do when Tommen's in power. She, however, isn't thinking, like if it was Tywin, for example, he would be thinking about what he could be doing right then. She's so preoccupied with thinking so far ahead that she's not, that like when those instantaneous decisions need to be made about what's happening in the now, she messes up, and she messes up big time. For example, as we're talking about the Faith Militant, I think that, like, there's definitely something to pity, because we are talking about information. We are talking about information as currency. And essentially, I feel like if she didn't know that prophecy, she would have been less likely to be as apprehensive to make the decisions that she had made. And because she's always so consumed by those ideas, and she's definitely very, very superstitious, you can kind of understand the psychology behind her fear a bit more, I feel like. And it's funny because when you compare, like, Cersei hates Marjorie so much for the hold that she has over her sons and stuff. But it's funny because Marjorie's actually handling the position she has the best way she can, compared to Cersei, who is not handling her position right at all. She's not monopolizing on the position she has as Queen Regent, or, you know, a potential Queen Regent. She's too busy thinking, oh, if I were a man, if I were a king, what I could do when I'm finally in that position. If I'm making any sense, I hope I am.
Yeah, she's always seemed to like trying to be like somebody else rather than who she could be.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that's where Sansa is really good, because Sansa assimilates to the role she has to play. And that's completely different to Cersei, because Cersei's too busy concentrating on other aspects of what she could be. Meanwhile, Sansa realizes exactly what she can be good for. And that's why she picks up on Baelish's, you know, his secrets, what he wants her to be so quickly. And I feel like, as I'm pretty sure Rachel was saying, like, there is a shift in how they're being referred to, you know, Sansa's being referred to as Elaine, and it's kind of like her assimilating and her becoming and manifesting this character that she's being told to portray the best way she can, because she's playing smart now. She's not playing dumb anymore. And we see, especially in, I think it was in the second book, where Joffrey's mistreatment of her, how she shifts, and she's kind of sly, but she's well aware of what she's doing, and she's acting in the best way she can to, you know, guarantee her own survival.
Hannah put in the chat, Hannah, I need to scroll up a bit. I will show it if I can. Yeah. I think Cersei's downfall was she was trying trying to imitate Tywin so much because she was thriving in the first few books before Tywin made his appearance. Now, I know this Tywin turns up in Storm of Swords, but I did notice that when Tywin turns up, she becomes almost petulant, and she tries to fight back against him, even though he's the one person who's always shut him down. Like, she fights back against Tywin more than she ever fought back against, for example, Robert, where Tywin will tell her, like, you have to go get married, and she says, no, I don't want to, no, I'm not going to. Like, I should be the queen, I should be this, I should be that. But I think she does definitely have a very interesting relationship with Tywin, and just how he has the ability, even though she's fighting back against him, his presence makes her act like a child. Like I said, she seems almost petulant when Tywin's around.
I think that was one of her biggest disappointments then, about the fact that she couldn't be a man, that she couldn't follow Tywin and Tywin wouldn't teach her, essentially, in a mentor-apprentice kind of relationship, the way he had essentially with Jaime. You know, Jaime is exactly what Tywin wanted him to be, and I feel like there is this intense jealousy Cersei has with Jaime, especially when Tywin does come into the picture, because she wants that, you know. We've had this conversation, so it's just like, as you're saying, you know, she's being very petulant. I feel like because there was such a hole in who has power over the Seven Kingdoms after Robert's death, Cersei looked at it, this is finally her time to be the man, essentially. And when that's completely taken away from her, despite, you know, Tywin not being the person who's actually, like, he's not king, he's not queen, but he's being given all the power that she feels as queen that she should be able to have. And it definitely does go into a conversation that can be said about the feminist ideologies of the world and the politics of the world itself. But I don't necessarily think that they portray George's beliefs. I feel like George is definitely a feminist. It's just the world he's writing in. It is like old school fantasy, but being moved forward into a new age. I feel like this book has so many more progressive characters. Like, we wouldn't be having Asha, Sansa, Daenerys, Cersei, and who am I missing?
Arya.
Thank you, Arya. They wouldn't be written the way they are if he didn't have the kind of mentalities, because you know, like Arya.
Brienne.
Yeah, especially, and Brienne and Arya are complete examples of the absolute juxtaposition of Sansa, the Sansas and the Cerseis of the world.
We also have the Sand Snakes as well. Two of those are more. I find the Sand Snakes interesting as well, because you have like the warrior one, the political one, and then one that's in the middle.
But they're all very stupid. They act very, very petulant.
Don't say that.
I'm sorry. I love them. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Bringing it over to Jaime a little bit and touching on what Zaf was saying. Cersei says all of the time, and I think it is because Tywin favored Jaime a lot. She's saying, like, I'm the son, like, I'm the one who's like Tywin. I am the one who can do this and can take his place. Whereas Jaime doesn't seem concerned with that, where I think that is because he is the chosen one, so he's never had to think like that. But if you think about both of the characters and you think about Tywin, they're like the perfect twins in that they do both make Tywin when they are together. Jaime doesn't have the brains, and Cersei doesn't have the military training or anything like that. So it is like, it's a shame that Tywin did not see that potential in Cersei just because she is a woman, because together they do essentially make Tywin Lannister. Like, Jaime does not have the ability for strategy and like scheming that Cersei does, but obviously he was favored because he was the male.
Yeah, you're completely right. I agree.
Yeah.
Can we talk about how mean Cersei is to my boy Jaime and her?
Ashley, every time you said things like, "Oh, Cersei doesn't really love Jaime," I was like, "Are you sure?" But no, she doesn't. And also, while we're talking about Tywin, do you think that could be the reason that she wants Jaime? Is because Jaime has everything that she wants, so she feels like if she's having Jaime, she's taking him away from what he's supposed to be, kind of thing, and then he's hers, and that gives her extra power.
Wow.
Kind of thing.
Also, it's kind of like her essentially, it's like sexually manifesting this power balance that she does not get to have, and she is manifesting this desire onto him of what she wants. Now, Jaime genuinely loves Cersei, but Cersei loves how Jaime loves Cersei. And that's what she's obsessed with. She's obsessed with the captors over him. And so when she loses the person that she has the most power over, her children won't even obey her fully. So when she loses also Jamie, that's why we're seeing her make such incredibly dumb choices and essentially having to pick herself up right from the bottom, you know, that regrowth, the rebirth she has essentially. After those situations, you just see her essentially realizing that, like, she shouldn't be so reliant on other people. And that was her biggest downfall. She was so reliant on the power that other people gave her, even if it was so minuscule, that she didn't create that zone for herself. And I completely agree with you, Ashley. I feel so bad for Jamie. He doesn't deserve to be the victim of so many different kinds of abuse.
But he still keeps going back to her every time.
He just scoffed even when she like said something really mean. I think at one point, like, he made a really mean joke about his dick, and he was just like, you know, whatever. Like,
yeah, I don't even think he was being nasty to her at one point, and she said something about him being a cripple, but like really nastily, because obviously the word cripple is used kind of like just commonplace in this world, but the way that she said it was malicious, and I was like, wow, Cersei. But it's interesting because from watching the show, and obviously now we have Cersei's perspective, we know what she's actually thinking. I obviously could see how she was using Jamie for various reasons, but I didn't really realize until I had her perspective, like, how much she is only using him, and the only sort of love that she feels for him is in terms of the fact that they've been together all their lives. Like, she's not devoted to him like Jamie is to her. She's devoted to power and what she can gain by keeping Jamie and just having control over him.
We definitely also see a juxtaposition in Jamie's character, essentially, you know, how we already know that he essentially saved everyone's lives, you know, we've freaking seen the show. But it's like, when we compare it to his heinous action against Bran, it kind of adds another kind of psychotic level to his adoration and his affection for Cersei. Cersei essentially like a drug that's permeated within him so deeply to the point that he's addicted and he is scared to lose that one thing. Obviously, his character has changed from those beginning moments. I feel like he's gained so much more heroism. You know, he saved Brienne from being raped, this, that, or the other. Essentially, he did save the entirety of King's Landing. But I think when it comes to a matter of Cersei, that's the one thing he at least wants to have for himself. I feel like being under Tywin's apprenticeship, essentially, he, you know, had to essentially manifest certain aspects of Tywin, as you said, Becca. So when, like, all his entire fate being a Lannister man and being an able-bodied Lannister man was written for him. So the one thing that he can also control over is this sexual and romantic desire he has towards Cersei. So Bran comes in, he could do the humane thing, or he could just allow himself to just keep that one secret aspect of his life that he thinks he made the decision for himself. Even though it was manipulative on Cersei's part, it does take two to tango. So I feel like this book, if anything, made me love Jamie more, because he deserves way more credit. I'm not pretending like he's a completely good character, but this definitely brings out the more gray elements of his character and George's writing, I feel.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that, you know, it's kind of like the only thing that he has control over, because he mentions, I believe it's in this book, that he found out like the only reason why he was brought into the Kingsguard was kind of a King Aerys' way of keeping an eye on Tywin and getting more control over the Lannisters. So basically everything in his life is kind of a lie. He was just giving it because of the political things going on in the world. He was just kind of used as bait for Tywin to keep him in line, you know? So that really sucked.
Yeah, because Tywin offered Cersei, and the Mad King said, no, I want Jamie, because obviously Tywin doesn't care that much about Cersei.
It's his son and it's his heir. He's taking away the heir to Castle Rock.
I find it interesting how Jamie has kind of fallen into this role, though, where, like, yeah, he still sleeps with Cersei, but he's, like, it's weird because everything he does is, like, counteracted with what he does for Cersei. Like, being in the Kingsguard? Yeah, why am I struggling so much with terminology today? Being in the Kingsguard means a lot to him. Like, he won't accept Casterly Rock, even when Tywin tells him, like, that he needs to take it. And there's lots of things that he won't do because he's in the Kingsguard, but he still sleeps with Cersei. And I also find that really interesting because I have just read a chapter where he is talking about a servant called, is she called Pia or Pia? And he says to his squire, oh, take her if you want her, but only if she's willing. And he's like really against rape. But in the same chapter, he says that if he would have found Arya when she ran away after Nymeria, Nymeria bit Joffrey, he would have killed her. So like he's like so against rape, but because Cersei wanted Arya dead, he would have killed her if he'd have found her. And like the Kingsguard is really important to him, aside from when he breaks his vows every time he sleeps with Cersei. So he has all these morals, but Cersei is like every exception.
Like Cersei is his downfall, and it's kind of like how he followed Cersei out of the womb, because Cersei was the first to be born between them. Like he follows Cersei out of the womb, but Jaime is also her downfall. You know, he follows her everywhere, but it's essentially, I feel like he's going to stab her in the back. I hope he does. I don't know how it's going to play out in the book, but I'm hoping that's what happens. But I feel like there is such a sad, beautiful, bitter relationship there. And I feel, no spoilers for season 8, but I feel like season 8 makes more sense having read this book and how Cersei is the exception to everything, no matter what's going on. Like Cersei is an exception.
That doesn't make it any easier.
No, it doesn't make it any easier, and it's so stupid, but I kind of understand a little bit now. Speaking of season 8, again, no spoilers, but there was a scene. It was right at the beginning. It might have been Cersei's first chapter, but she picked up a glass of wine and went to the window, and I was like, yeah, okay, I see where your entire character is coming from now. It made me laugh so much.
I feel like there is definitely a conversation that needs to be had, especially when we talk about Jaime, the Brienne versus Cersei part of him. Because Cersei, again, like as you just said, he is that addiction. She is the exception, you know. But Brienne is like, that's when we're beginning to see other aspects of Jaime's character. Like she brings out the good in him, and I feel like that's what brings out this very bittersweet concept. You know, his mind exists within the spheres of these two women. And I feel like after all that time with Brienne, I feel like that's why we start to see him be so much more faithful to his vows as a Kingsguard after he returns, because that's the impact that Brienne has had on him. He obviously knows that Brienne wants to be a knight, and she would probably adore the idea of being a Kingsguard, but it's just something that can't, there has been no woman knight, and it's a dream that she can never really attain. So I feel like he has a newfound respect for the position that he has, and that's especially because of her.
Yeah, Hannah just said something that made me think of kind of the ending of the book, as how like Cersei shits on Jaime all the time, and then when it comes to the end, that's all she's like begging for his help, And I think that's where we kind of see a shift in Jaime's relationship with Cersei, when she keeps on sending him ravens like, come help me, and he doesn't respond to any of them.
They have I know Rachel wanted to speak a little bit about Cersei and some stuff that happens with her, just while we're on these two still.
Oh, yeah. So I found it really interesting how we saw a new side to Cersei in this book, of her kind of exploring her female sexuality. There's one scene which I feel comes completely out of the blue. She's talking to, she's with one of her like handmaids or kind of consorts. I don't know what she calls them because I can't remember, but she's talking about this woman's really dark nipples, and she's talking about what it would be like to have it in her mouth, what it would be like to have sex with this person. And then she does end up doing things with this person and exerting her power over this person. And I do see it as a very kind of masculine thing that she is doing. She's like, if I had a penis, I would be Jaime, I would be fucking this person. And she's also like, I'm actually not getting anything from this being a woman, having this experience, because I'm not a man. But it was all I understood it from her character, but at the same time, I don't feel as though there'd been enough foreshadowing for that to be part of what, like, why she would do that so completely out of the blue at this point. I just thought it was a bit like, it was just George R.R. Martin putting a scene in for his own amusement and pleasure, I think. But that's just my... Yeah.
Okay, I personally disagree with that. I feel like no. It's a conversation, so it's fine.
Until Zaz starts shouting.
It's a gender economic kind of idea. I feel that's coming through. This is like when we're talking about gender, we obviously know this is a very I forgot the word, but it's a very masculine society, right? It's very male dominated. So within that kind of society, the kind of power men have over women, especially in a sexual sphere, is something that Cersei will never be able to attain. So I feel like that experience is essentially her trying to attain that kind of power. I think that, like obviously, sex exists. Sex can be nice in books, but I feel like in that aspect, it's definitely very, very symbolic, because how Cersei uses her sex is always, in my opinion, a way of her exerting her power over people. How she did it over Lancel, how she does it to Jaime, and then also how she's doing it to this handmaiden.
Ashley, I feel like you had something.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to find it, but I don't know if I don't remember reading this whenever I read them before, but it's the scene where Gilly and Sam
I've got that written down, yeah.
Oh, and there's like a moment where apparently Gilly was drinking rum earlier in the day, and this is one of those things where I'm like, I think George kind of let slip maybe one of his kinks into this book, where he like goes to suck on her nipple and he starts to drink the milk from her nipple, and I was just like, oh my God. And he was like, oh, it tastes like sweet rum. And I'm just like, what is happening right now? Sorry if that's your kink. Sorry if that's your kink. I'm sorry. That's not my kink. But I was like, oh.
We don't kink shame in this.
Oh. Maybe George R.R. Martin just likes nipples, because there was a scene between, is it Aerys Oakhart? Is that the name of the
I think so, yeah.
Kingsguard? And Arianne Martell, where they're having sex and she squeezes his nipples. And that he likes that, and I'm like,
hey, I think we figured it out. It's
he likes nipples.
Or maybe Westeros just really likes nipples.
Yeah. All nipples, lady nipples, man nipples, lactating nipples.
Yeah. The scene with Gilly and Sam was interesting, in the sense that, of course, it's Sam's first time. He's losing his virginity. It's also something that he's not really fully on board with doing. And I feel as though he was kind of coerced into it. At the same time, yeah, it was consensual, but I do feel as though there was like a level of coercion there. But then immediately after, Gilly says, we're married now. I'm your wife. She's like, I've given myself to you and we're now together. And he's like, oh no, like I'm still a man of the Night's Watch. It's like what's that kind of phrase? It's like lads on tour. Like I'm away from the wall right now. But it felt as though like he definitely couldn't backpedal from that, and he's really in it now.
That's so cute. I love that.
I love how Sam also kind of like grows a pair of balls this book, where he, like, listen, you're coming back to the Night's Watch right now, and he beats up a fellow brother.
Yeah,
he just ended up thrown in the canal though, so
yeah.
He's trying.
At the end of the book, he's like speaking to somebody, and he's like saying that he's here, and they're like, aren't you that guy that got sent to the wall? And they're talking about this, and they called him like, are you still Craven? And he was just like, they call me Slayer. And he's just like, Sam, and he was like, okay, maybe that's OTT, but they do. He's so sweet.
The thing that happens with Gilly and the baby being swapped, does that happen in the show? It doesn't, does it? Because does the other baby even exist in the show?
Nope.
I'm confused. I must have missed that bit.
Gilly is crying the entire time that they're on the sea, and Sam just says that she's scared. And then Maester Aemon says, no, she's grieving because of her baby. And Sam says, well, what do you mean? She has a baby. And Maester Aemon says that the baby was swapped, and she actually has Mance Rayder's baby. She doesn't have her own. She left her baby at the wall.
Yeah, that doesn't happen in the show.
Yeah, I didn't think it did, but so like I'm really confused about why that's happening because it's something that's different from the storyline that I know. But I did find Gilly. I find Gilly annoying in the books, but then I also found her annoying in the show because it's Cassie from Skins that plays her, and that's all I see.
I see her that, yeah, that as well.
Yeah, and I'm just like, why are you here? Why are you doing this? And it's she's a very distinctive looking actress as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, just because she was crying all the time and she doesn't talk, and like the way Sam describes her, she's just like a little mouse, and like her hair's all matted and she's crying. And I think I found her frustrating because she wasn't communicating with Sam. Like Sam had to find out from somebody else what had happened, and nobody had told him, even though he's the main caretaker of Gilly.
I can definitely understand that, but I feel like she was also kind of scared. You know, like she went through so many years of her life being at Craster's Keep with all of his wives, all these children. And now she's so far south of the wall. I can kind of understand her fear, but I do definitely agree. Like the person she should be able to rely on and trust the most is Sam.
Yeah, like just the lack of communication really was frustrating me because we don't know about this baby until Mr. Aemon says, and like obviously I'm only 500 pages in, so I don't know if it's ever confirmed that is actually what happened, because that causes Sam to lose trust in Jon, because he says, well, Jon Snow wouldn't do this, and Mr. Aemon says no, but Lord Commander Snow would. But I felt like it was very vague, and obviously I haven't finished it, maybe further explained, but just the way it was revealed, it was kind of like a side note, like, oh yeah, this is what the baby, moving on to what they're actually doing.
I have no idea. I've read it twice now and I still like don't really fully get it, so I'm just kind of like, I've forgotten a lot.
They didn't explain why in any way.
I don't think they will, because the end of the next book, like obviously we know what that is, and these books run parallel, so I think anything to do with the repercussions of this is going to be coming and hasn't been written yet.
Yeah.
Can I ask, in terms of like the next book, is that where we have a battle of the bees or not?
No, that doesn't exist.
Because at the end, okay, spoilers for people who haven't read the next book, just mute for like 10 seconds. Jon dies at the end of the next books.
Yes.
So it's after that, after he's brought back to life and everything like that, that's when the Battle of the Bees is going to be.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so
is Theon going to be in the next one then?
Yes, I think.
Bolton?
No. I don't remember, to be honest.
No. So Theon currently is, being tortured by the Boltons.
Yeah,
right?
he's Reek.
Yeah. But we're kind of still clueless. Like, I can't remember.
I don't think we've seen it in the books yet.
Oh, as far as we're aware, Theon's dead.
Yeah.
And as far as anybody else whose perspectives we're currently following, Theon is dead.
What did you guys think of I'm pretty sure, so you know how in the prologue chapter there is that boy named Pate, right? And then there is a scene later on, I think it might be with Samwell, where he meets a guy named Pate.
At the very end, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, this is a weird kind of mirroring right here. And I'm kind of curious. I'm like, is that the same guy that killed him from the beginning? Now, finally at the Citadel? No, I'm kind of curious. Like, taking his identity. Obviously, it's not the same person, but like stealing his name and stuff like that. I'm curious.
It's an interesting question. But to confirm, Reek does get chapters in the next book.
Okay. So we'll see more from him. So I'm guessing that the themes of transition and change will continue into the next book then, because obviously Reek is a big embodiment of that theme. So yeah, I thought he would have been in this one. It's weird how they've how the perspectives have split. I believe that the next one is everybody across the sea and in the north, and then this one is just King's Landing and the people from King's Landing. I think is how they split it. But then Sam is in Bravos at the bit where I'm up to. He's on his way to Old Town. So
he ends in Old Town.
He ends up in Old Town eventually. So I've lost
do
my sheet.
Do we think that Podrick is Robert Baratheon's son also?
No.
Because Brienne was having a long conversation with him and asking him about his genealogy. He said that he didn't really know where he's from. And talking about his characteristics. And they were very similar, like physical characteristics to Robert Baratheon. Is he meant to be another bastard? Because I know that book-wise, Robert Baratheon's said to have, is it 10 and 6? The hag said that how many children he would have, which is like, I don't know. I can't like think about it at the top of my head, but I know that he has quite a few like bastards running around. And it's not just the one from like the TV show that we've seen, which I can't remember the name of, and also it's like spoilers, but there are more. I just thought that Brienne was kind of like alluding to that.
Like I'm pretty sure Sansa meets one of his other bastards who's a girl and like befriends her or whatnot. But I don't know. Personally, I don't think Podrick could be one, but I think it's a very interesting angle, and it could be what happens in the book. The show just probably doesn't explore that.
Sorry, I've just noticed Ashley's dog behind her.
Oh,
Oh my god, literally Ashley just said completely unrelated, but I just noticed the doggo. Like, oh my god, what a baby.
Your dogs, it's completely irrelevant, but your dogs tuck themselves under blankets, don't they, Ashley?
One of them does. There's another one curled up over here. He likes to go under blankets.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, so character-wise, if we have no more to say about Sam and Gilly, I think the other main ones are Sansa and Arya.
Are we sure? Because I found the passage. I can read it so everyone.
Go on.
Oh, hold on. I gotta find it again. I've marked it. Here we go. But one of her nipples found its way between his lips. It was pink and hard, and when he sucked on it, her milk filled his mouth, mingling with the taste of rum. And he had never tasted anything so fine and sweet and good.
Bless him.
That's not fun. No, I'm not a fan.
I'm not feeling it, to be honest.
Yeah,
no, but I definitely think that he likes nipples.
Yep. I can confirm that.
Okay, so Sansa and Arya, any preference which we discuss first? Anybody have something they desperately want to say about either?
I think it's kind of interesting how Sansa and Cersei seem to take a shift. So in the beginning of so when we look at the first book to now, like Sansa's super, super petulant, she's really, really stupid and annoying and obnoxious. And Cersei seems so calm and controlled and in power. But now we're getting a major shift. And obviously we're not really seeing Sansa's perspective that much, but she's smart. She's playing the game so smart and playing how she needs to. Meanwhile, Cersei's too busy. Sorry, I just ruined the camera angle of the book. Meanwhile, Cersei's being an absolute plonker. So I thought that's kind of interesting because they definitely do parallel from each other, and Sansa is definitely a student of Baelish, but she's also a student of Cersei because Cersei is someone she aspired to be. I feel like she felt such a stronger tie with Cersei than she did with her own mother, Catelyn. So I thought that was kind of interesting. If anyone has thoughts on that.
Yeah, actually, well, I mean, yeah, because I thought with Sansa in the first few books, I didn't think she had too much to add, but that was because I didn't really understand that she was sort of observing. Like, she was more of an observant character in the first few books, and then it wasn't until she like sort of got away from that net of King's Landing that she started to really come into her own, I guess, and like using what she's learned. So no, I found that really interesting because, as you said, like I didn't make the correlation there, but yeah, Cersei's getting a bit more reckless with like how she's using her skills, I guess. Whereas Sansa's like, yeah, she's kind of studied it, and it's totally flipped. I know in the last live show I probably did give Sansa enough credit. So I think, yeah, like now in hindsight, comparing her with Cersei, as Becca said before, like they are quite similar. And it wasn't until like probably this book that I could like understand that and like agree with that. So no, I agree with that. I think there is some correlation there.
Yeah, I've never been the biggest Sansa fan. I really didn't begin to like her until watching the TV show. But you can really tell, like everyone has said, that you can really see her growth she's kind of like Baelish is her mentor, and you kind of see her learn how to manipulate people into believing a certain narrative. And then there's also something, because we all know how terrible she was when it came to Jon, and she mentions in her inner dialogue that since she's pretending to be Elaine, this base-born girl, that she's a bastard now because she's like fully submerged herself into this role, and that it would actually kind of be nice to see Jon again. And I was like, oh, okay, we stand a growth queen, So I did enjoy her chapters and seeing her growth and seeing where she's headed in her character arc.
I think the thing that surprised me the most about Sansa this time around is that I enjoyed her chapters more than Arya's. Which I wasn't expecting, considering that Arya is on this path to become an assassin, which is something that I generally like to read about. But I've been finding Sansa's chapters a lot more interesting, and it's interesting as well because I actually despise the characters that she's with right now, because I don't like Baelish and I really don't like Robert Arryn.
Oh my god.
Is that his name? Yeah, Robert Arryn.
Yeah.
And just, oh god, no, he creeps me out. He's
Same.
always creeps me out. The way she said that he gets into a bed and nuzzles her breasts, and I'm like, no, I appreciate he's a child, but that makes him creepier to me. I don't know why. I think it's because I don't really like kids to start off with. So I'm just like, no, get away from me, get away. But yeah, it's she's still questioning with what she's doing. So there's moments where Baelish will tell her something and she'll say, no, that's not right. And he's like, no, we're playing a game. Like, that is right. So she is still learning. But I like how she's not only learning from him, she's learning to trick him at the same time. She's learning things about his character as we're going along and realizing that maybe he isn't trustworthy. Like, she started to pick up on the obsession that he had with Catelyn and how that has transferred onto her, which I think is quite, because the way that Peter's playing it, I don't feel like that's overly obvious. It is a little bit because he keeps creeping on her, but from Sansa's perspective, she understands that is a transference of the obsession. Like, she understands that's not because of how he feels about her, it's because he wants her because of her mother, kind of thing, which that's the part that I don't find overly obvious, if that makes sense. So that she's managed to figure that out, because how old is she at this point? Is she 13?
Something like that.
13, 14, I think.
13 or 14. But she's definitely growing as a character, and I like how it is a developing thing, so she isn't just instantly being able to trick everybody. And the way that she keeps questioning Baelish and kind of retaining the information that he's telling her and the information that he's displaying is like really showing the process of her character growth, which I guess is a main theme of this book with all of the characters, because like Zaf said at the beginning, he wanted to do a time jump, but instead chose to write the character growth and how that's coming about.
I think that one of the very interesting aspects, and I'm so sad it wasn't explored in the show, but I kind of understand why there is a big age difference between the actors, but the relationship between Sandor and Sansa, I feel like it is, obviously that's an age gap, but it's literature, so let's not think about it too much. But I'm just thinking, like, what the influence that Sandor has on Sansa is so much more than the influence that Sansa has on Sandor, because he's a good person, like he's a decent person underneath it all. He's truthful to himself, even if he's being an absolute bastard. He's truthful to himself. But Sansa brings out a kind of gentleness in him, and for Sansa, he is her sexual awakening. I feel like we see multiple times that, you know, he is the man that she thinks of most when she's not thinking about the other men that are like physically surrounding her or in her bloodline. And she has, you know, I feel like she has this feeling that he is her safety, especially in I think it was in the second book, where essentially, you know, we see him being the only person really looking out for her other than Tyrion, but Tyrion would be too busy doing other things. So the only person that was most privy to her suffering and the one protecting her the most was Sandor. So I feel like just seeing the little moments where she kind of reminisces on him during the book was kind of interesting. Their relationship, at least the chemistry and the impact that he has on her and stuff like that. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm one of the few people who do not ship the Hound and Sansa. Like I get the whole age gap, but there are a few times where he was like, "I could rape you. Like I could rape you right now." I'm like,
he says that to everybody. Literally everybody he meets, he's like, "I could rape you if I wanted to." I'm like, okay.
I do like how it was portrayed more in the TV show. It seemed more like a like a father-daughter type of situation. I read that the reason why they didn't explore that is because the actor who played Sandor was uncomfortable with being intimate with her because he did meet her when she was like 11 years old. So that's an interesting thought.
Which I definitely understand. And like, I feel like, especially like, sure, incest, whatever, Jamie Cersei complex, that's like, but they're the same age. So this is a different kind of obscene sphere that I feel like there's obviously a scare to go into. And obviously there is a big time jump between when Sandor and Sansa last meet to when they will meet in the future. And I definitely think the book's going to show it in a very different way. But I'm not saying like I ship them. I just think it's really interesting.
I agree. It is an interesting dynamic. I mean, that's what I can't sit here and be like, that is disgusting, because I really like Dany and Khal Drogo together, and they have like a same difference, age difference. You know, it's the same thing. It's just, I don't know, Sandor just comes off a little more creepy to me.
Oh,
than Khal Drogo did. I
think it's
Sorry,
because Sansa is more portrayed as a child than Dany ever was as well.
Yeah.
Like Sansa has always behaved, for the first 2 books going into the third, Sansa is very childlike, whereas Dany kind of had to grow up really quickly because she was married to Khal Drogo and then she became the Khaleesi, and she was subject to all of this brutality, and then like she had her brother as well, and she's been on the run her entire life, so she's had to grow up a lot more quickly than Sansa has. So that may be why the relationship is a lot more creepy as well, because we see Sansa behaving like a child where we don't really see Dany behaving like a child.
I think that, and also when we kind of look into Sandor's psychology, I feel like that kind of needs to be taken into account. The way he's abused by everyone, and the abuse he had to suffer as a child. Oh wow, what is that?
That's on a spaceship.
Sorry.
She's been abducted by aliens.
Is it me? Hello?
Yeah.
I think so.
Hello.
1 second, let me mute and unmute. Hello?
Hi.
Yeah.
There we go.
Hi.
Yeah, there we go.
Like, he suffered this like incredibly horrific, incredibly graphic abuse, and he only let Sansa be privy to that. And I feel like that's him beginning to acknowledge that this is this really horrible thing. Yeah, he did say that he'd kill her if she told anyone, but I feel like his meanness is his way of kind of cushioning the blow of his honesty. You know? I feel like he's just too scared to actually like not be this character that he's had to make himself be the entire time.
Yeah, I think there's a parallel with Tyrion there as well, because both of them are considered monstrous, whereas Tyrion acts against that stereotype and behaves like a civilized person. And he's obviously really intelligent and stuff, up until like the point where he tells Jaime that he did kill Joffrey even though he didn't. He goes against the monster stereotype, where the Hound, I feel like, has been, because he's disfigured with his burns and stuff, and just because he's the Mountain's brother as well, he's made out into this villain, and he's made out to be stupid, and they call him a dog. So he feels like he views himself as a monster, and he plays into that to protect himself, because obviously as a child growing up with the Mountain, I imagine he's been extremely vulnerable, because they are both big powerful men, but the Mountain is a mountain. And we know that his brother treated him awfully as a child, so I just think that his nastiness is just self-defense. And he has like I'm going off the show in this because I don't know in the book, but we have seen the Hound with Arya, but I think he has some pretty strong paternal instincts.
Yeah,
I agree.
That he like buries. We see it illustrated a lot in the show and later on in the show, but even the way that he went after Arya, and it's like he doesn't know how to be vulnerable, because at the same time that he's looking after Arya, he's dragging her about and telling her that he'll kill her if she doesn't do certain things. But I think
Sounds quite
one of
fatherly
my
to me.
favorite characters. Yeah.
I feel like the romantic aspect is brought out by Sansa, whilst the paternal aspect is brought out by Arya, at least in the book.
I wonder why he chooses to confide in Sansa. Like, I wonder what it is. I'm sure there's a reason, but why
I think he knew that she was in such a position that she could die so easily.
Mhm.
And so she was kind of in such a vulnerable position. And there was something about the vulnerability and her having to play a role. You know, she has to be so subservient to Joffrey, and despite all of his abuses, that he could kind of sympathize to. And, you know, he felt a tie to. So in a world full of her basically being the lowest level in court, in the court of like politics and stuff like that, I feel like I don't know, it just resonated with him, and maybe that's why.
I don't know. Yeah, part of me also thinks that he likes to just fuck with her, you know.
Too.
And in the beginning, you know, he kind of was like, she has this, like, she lives in a bubble. She doesn't understand how life works. I'm gonna show her, like, people are mean, and then that kind of their relationship delves into something a little bit deeper than that.
That kind of stuff that he's doing, he is doing it for her benefit, because she's saying, "Why are you being so nasty to me?" And he's like, "Everybody's being nasty to you. I'm just the person who's just like being straight nasty to you." And he's like telling her that she needs to wake up. He calls her little bird, like he tells her all the time that she's been overprotected and she doesn't know what things are really like in the world. And I think one of the reasons that I don't like Sansa, especially very early on, is because she's got this like elitism where she's like, "Oh, why is this happening to me? I'm Sansa Stark," and the Hound is like bringing her down to reality, like, nobody cares who you are, this is what the world is really like, it doesn't matter who you are, like, shit is gonna happen to you and you have to deal with it.
Definitely.
So Arya, then, any thoughts on her aside from the only thing I really have to say, I have something else, but that leads into another topic, so I'll mention it when we're done discussing Arya. But the only other thing I really have to say is that I don't think her chapters were as interesting as I wanted them to be. Like, what she's doing is interesting, but the way it is written, I wasn't invested.
I feel like Arya... Sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, just like now she's like this little cat in the canals. So we get like the first few chapters where she's kind of being introduced to the concept of being a nameless child. And everything that she ever says, she's being told that she's lying. And then she hides Needle. I mean, she gets rid of everything else, but she hides Needle. And like she's still trying to hold on. I just feel as though the book has portrayed it that she actually isn't really meant to be where she is. She doesn't really want to get rid of who she is. She just kind of found herself here. She kind of likes the idea of being a nameless girl, but it just doesn't seem to fit really with where she's going and what she wants to achieve. And I'm not even sure that she knows what she wants to achieve with this endeavor. And then she's sent off to be Cat of the Canals. And I couldn't really tell you what went on there. I'm sure I could if I thought about it, but nothing particularly interesting. And then she, you know, goes back again and she's explained all these little secrets that she's picked up. And then obviously then she wakes up blind, and then that's it. There's not much more to it that went on there. And it wasn't like there wasn't any like crisis of things that she was going on through her mind. It's all a bit of a happy accident why she's ended up.
I think because her story is so self-contained as well, it's like doesn't really have any kind of effect on anything that's going on in the main story. Yeah. So I agree. It's like, and especially with Becca as well, like it didn't interest me that much, I guess, because I guess like I'm sorry, Zaf, if I offend you with this, but that's why I thought like Dany's chapters in A Storm of Swords, with it being so far removed from the action of what happened in Storm of Swords, I felt her chapters weren't as impactful as I was hoping they would be. So like kind of similarish to Arya in this book was that I didn't feel like she had a point. Like he could have easily gotten rid of all of Arya's chapters and then maybe like had her in Dance with Dragons and then, you know, just introduce her that way. So I felt like just, same as you, it just didn't feel like there was like any real point to it. And then she wakes up blind and then I was like, that was it. And I'm like, okay, like what was the point?
What I really hope is that he does it better than the show did it, where he actually writes in everything that she does here as being an important part of the show and that an important part of the book and the story. I hope that he's written in like her actually using the talents that she's gained during this time for those to be pivotal points in the book plot. Whereas in the show, you could have removed all that because aside from her training to be an assassin, there's no need for her to be able to steal people's faces.
Yeah. Okay. Zaf, shut up. I disagree, but then that would be a lot of show spoilers, so I'm just gonna leave that for now. But yeah, no, I can understand that she definitely wasn't as impactful as other people, and I think predominantly what comes into my mind is that I think we're just getting an understanding of kind of state of the world in other areas, a bit more world building. And like I do agree, I didn't find them as impactful, and it was disappointing for me because that was where I feel like most of the fantastical elements of this book was concentrated, and it just felt so lackluster in compared to the the storylines we could have been having with I feel like the way things were split is probably okay. We'll see better obviously when we read the next book, but I don't feel like it was the best way possible because you've got the dragons and the whites and all that jazz completely separated, and at most we have faceless people and like little hints of magic strewn around in this one. And I just feel like that isn't a good split because we are seeing such a detached part of the world. It doesn't almost feel like the same world, and because even that like mystical element is so dull, essentially, like the way it's portrayed is so dull, it does feel harder to essentially look at the book as a fantasy rather than just a political thriller. I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's exactly what I would want to say, but I can't articulate things as well as you, so it made it sound really good. Whereas I just, yeah.
I've never. Oh, sorry. No, once kind of like with Sansa, I've never been like a Team Arya fan. I've found even her. I like her more in the show, but I find her chapters so incredibly boring. But what I think is so interesting is because the whole point of like the many faceless god is to be able to turn into people. You are no one. And that's kind of what Arya has been doing since the beginning. She has assumed so many different identities since she left King's Landing. Mm-hmm. She's been like Squab. She's been Arya. So she's kind of already assumed the role of no one. But I do agree that she does have a really hard time like shedding her starkness. I mean, that's kind of why she came here in the first place, was to get revenge or start to get revenge. I'm not really sure, to be honest.
I feel like her chapters, especially when she's at Bravos, is they are so symbolical. What's the word?
Symbolic.
Thank you. Like symbological. That's not the word. The symbolic. Let's just go symbolic. I feel like there's a lot of symbolic, implications of her decisions, e.g., hiding Needle. That is not her rejecting her old identity. That's her putting it away because the situation she is in necessitates her not being. Oh my God! Don't do this to me. Necessitates her not being who she has to be.
This how you stop Zaf from being articulate. You bring it up.
Puppy love.
I think one of the interesting things about Arya's story arc as a whole, going from what we know from the books and from the show, so like whether it's different in the books at the end is another matter, but if you think of that as like a whole arc and you think about it just about all the things that she goes through, I think her character arc is one of the most interesting out of everybody's, because if you think about Cersei stays in King's Landing the entire time. She never goes anywhere else, whereas Arya is all over the world. She learns all of these different skills, which do seem to prove useful later on. But if I think about Arya individually, so I break it down to per book and per season, nothing that she has ever done has been interesting at the time that she's doing it. So for the first 3 books, she's just wandering. Like she's at Harrenhal, didn't really care about that. She is on the road. I think the most interesting thing that she's done is when she's on the road with Gendry and Hot Pie. I think that's the most interesting, the most interested I've been in her story. But she's training to be an assassin, and it's just not interesting to read about, even though that theoretically is a really interesting subplot in this story. And then what she goes on to do later on is again very interesting. It's just when you break it down into the individual parts, at the times that they're happening, I don't care. I'm not interested in anything she's doing, and it's a shame because her arc as a whole is great.
I agree with Becca. I've just always been so bored with her chapters. They have a point. I know they do, but everything else around is kind of more interesting to me.
I can respect that. I don't fully agree,
So-
but I completely understand where you're coming from, especially when you look at the writing as to how Arya's chapters are written. You can understand the pragmatics of it and the importance of it, but semantically it doesn't resonate with you as much as, for example, Sansa chapters would do.
Any more thoughts on Arya before I segue it into a new topic?
Did we
No?
touch
No.
on Brienne and Lady Stoneheart as well?
Not yet, no. Do you wanna? I'll finish up this bit with that because it does connect to Arya a little bit.
Okay.
And then we can dive back into some more characters. But essentially, at the same time I've been reading Feast for Crows, I've also been reading Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff.
Oh.
Now, if you saw Jay Kristoff's promotion for Dark Dawn, he was retweeting hate tweets and hate reviews. And one of them was that people couldn't understand how he had made money off an Arya Stark fanfiction. Now, if you read Nevernight and you read this book, Feast for Crows, it's completely like I understand how people have drawn that conclusion, because as soon as we got to the chapters in the House of Black and White, it felt like the Red Church in Nevernight, and I had like the same feeling. And while in Nevernight we don't have the many faces, we do have a character whose father is killed, whose mother is imprisoned, who is trying to get revenge on her family. She has a list of people that she wants to kill to avenge her parents. And this got me thinking about how when a fantasy is released, it is usually penned as being the new Game of Thrones. So then I was thinking about Game of Thrones, and I realized that George R.R. Martin has taken a whole lot of very popular mythology, fairy tales, legends, historical events, and tropes and mixed them all together and put them in Game of Thrones. Now, I'm sure Zaf is going to be able to think of more of these than I can. But one very noticeable one to me is the story of Helen, Paris, and Agamemnon, which is Lyanna as Helen, Rhaegar as Paris, and I think it's Agamemnon, and that would be Robert. And then we also have the Brotherhood Without Banners, who are essentially Robin Hood and his merry men. So I was wondering whether, when people are saying that this new fantasy book is like Game of Thrones, what they're actually saying is it reminds me of this very popular story that is present in Game of Thrones.
Okay, I completely agree, and I feel like this is one of the biggest issues. Maybe I'm calling a lot of people out, but I feel like this is one of the biggest issues when it comes to people who are privy to stories, and especially when it comes to essentially the book reviewing community. We are so quick to label things as a new version of this, a play on this, that, and the other. But frankly, everything is a copy of everything. Because all of Shakespeare's work are copies of themselves. Much Ado About Nothing is essentially Romeo and Juliet. It's just, and it ends like in a happy way, and so on and so forth. And then you go all the way down to like ancient Greek, stories and mythologies and stuff like that. And you just realize that everything is a copy of everything. So when people make that comparison, and I can understand it, I can respect it, but personally I found the Assassin's Creed 2, it's not really spoilers, it literally happens in the first part of the game. Our main character, this is a game based in Italy, so I feel like this is way more likely something that J. Kristoff is going to be inspired by. But it's a game based in Italy. His parents die and he has to kill a list of people. It's the exact same thing Mia Colvert does, and it's the exact same thing that Arya does, and it's the exact same thing a lot of people do in revenge fantasies. What J. Kristoff doing is not necessarily revolutionary. It's just, as you said, he is just using these tropes, these very famous storylines, and amalgamating them into one text. And the problem is, I feel like this is the first time people have been privy to a story which has that kind of amalgamation of so many different kinds of storylines, so many different kinds of stereotypes, that they think that it's original, but it's not original. It's just a clusterfuck of everything together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing's original anymore. Nothing.
Honestly, that's the key.
But I did notice in Game of Thrones there is a lot. Like there is the Seven Kingdoms are representative of people like the Anglos and the Nords, etc., like settling in England. I'm really bad at history. But like each band, like the I think the Dothraki is supposed to represent, is it the Mongols?
Mm-hmm.
and the Targaryens, I think, are the Nords, and it's essentially British history, all of that
It is.
stuff.
It's
and
the War of
then-
the Roses. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the one thing he copied the most was the War of the Roses. So before anyone tries to like sue anyone else for copyright, like you need to sue George R.R. Martin for copying the entire British royal history. So,
but I also what city do we think Braavos is based on, by the way? Because I immediately thought Venice, and obviously I was reading Dark Dawn at the same time. But I did look into it, and I have also seen London and Amsterdam, although Amsterdam would be unlikely because Amsterdam was created a lot later in like linear time if he's actually making it more historically accurate.
I don't think it's London simply because London is King's Landing. Like when you look at the Game of Thrones, exactly, when you look at the Game of Thrones map geographically, it does resonate. Like, really, but like King's Landing is essentially, London, and then when you go even lower, that's when we come into your territory, Becca. We go to Dawn. That's where everything's really, really sunny, and we already know that Britain is sun deficient, so that's where you get North Europe. So I'm just gonna even though Italy is like Central Europe, I'm gonna pretend like it's North because I definitely see the Venice comparison.
Yeah. Like as soon as, obviously I was reading Dark Dawn at the same time, but just the comparison, it was weird. It was weird reading them both alongside each other. And as soon as they got, because Braavos being Venice is not something that I noticed at all when I was watching the show, but the descriptions, I instantly just thought of Venice, which is interesting because from watching the show, I thought that it was more like, I don't know. I didn't think it was Spain because Dawn has always reminded me of Spain. But I thought it was a warmer European climate than northern Italy. Yeah, Venice is in northern Italy. I don't know why.
I do think of Spain. I'm not going to lie. I think of Spain when I think of Braavos more so than I think of Italy. I just feel like the just how sunny it is and the kind of culture that it kind of emanates and the kind of colorfulness that it has, as well as the sexual fluidity and all of that, just it seems to resonate more so with Spain than it does with Italy.
The internet does say that Braavos is similar to Venice, and it's meant to resemble the merchant cities in Italy in general. Also potentially the Netherlands and Germany, because they. Yeah.
So I know Gav wanted to talk about, was it Brienne?
Yeah, but Ashley doesn't want spoilers in the comments.
No, that's for Dark Dawn.
Oh, for Dark Dawn.
Right, I'm going to BRB while you start talking about that. So just do whatever you want, guys. I'm going to say.
Awesome. I guess with like Brienne and stuff, because I haven't read anything more, and then we did briefly talk about this before we went live. But like with Brienne, she's obviously hell bent on finding these Stark girls for Catelyn. She has this need. Not exactly need, but like this obligation, like because obviously Catelyn took her in, and things like that. So she's been trying to find Arya and Sansa. And I guess by the time we get towards the end of this book, and we've been on this journey with Brienne, and I feel so let down for Brienne the way that this has happened, because then we do get introduced to Lady Storm. Actually, no, not introduced, because she was introduced at the end of the last one. But like sort of like in this book, the introduction of Lady Stoneheart in this book is when she is confronted with Brienne and Podrick. And I don't know, I just feel a bit let down if this is where her character development has went, because Brienne has put these two young girls who she's actually never met before her own life. And I guess, I mean, I don't really have a point or anything, but like, I was so kind of like upset by, I know Lady Stoneheart isn't exactly Catelyn. She's like sort of like the resurrected version of her. It's not exactly her, like per se, but like Brienne's doing so much for her, and I know she wants her to sort of betray Jaime kind of thing. But I don't know, like I genuinely don't know where I'm going with this. I just wanted to sort of like rant about it, because like I don't want to think too. I mean, we talked about Catelyn in the last live show for Storm of Swords. and I said like I didn't like her as much as I did like her in the show. I thought Caitlin was a bit more. I don't know, like in the books, I just didn't like her as much. But I don't want Lady Stoneheart, like, because I hate the resurrection trope to begin with. I don't want Lady Stoneheart to retcon what happened in Storm of Swords with like Caitlin and stuff. So like Lady Stoneheart is making me hate Caitlin more. So far from what we've seen from her, we only saw her in the one chapter. But yeah, I guess like I just want to talk about what she does to Brienne because I don't know what happens next because like I haven't read it and I don't know if Brienne's in Dance with Dragons or if you see her survive or not. But there's also Podrick to think about, poor Podrick, you know. So yeah, I feel really bad about it. I was so upset. That was like probably the only moment in this book where I felt like really upset. Whereas there was like 15 moments in Storm of Swords where I genuinely felt like punched in the tit. Sort of thing. So
Bless you.
yeah.
She is fine, but I absolutely understand where you're coming from. Like, I have some empathy for the idea of Lady Stormheart because she's essentially a manifestation of Caitlyn's revenge and her anger and her anguish. So that's where all her concentration is at, more so than, you know, any other. She doesn't pay anyone else but her own family. Catelyn's priority has always been to her own bloodline. So and that just manifests so much more so with the whole Stoneheart trope. She is stone-hearted to anything other than her own family, and she is firm and resolute in where her priorities lie. But Brienne, who's been working so hard and been so faithful, like, sure, it sucks, but it's not fair on Brienne. And that kind of heartlessness is really, like, not fair. Brienne's an absolute baby. She deserves the world.
She is. Yeah, but it makes me really scared of Lady Stoneheart now. Like, I kind of want her to succeed because I feel like she has been wronged. I feel like all of the Starks have been wronged, and I want her to succeed. But in this book, it just made me sort of like really question it. Like, I'm more scared of Lady Stoneheart than I am of like anybody else in the book series because we haven't really had a lot of the White Walkers, I guess. Like so far, like it's always been more ominous.
I didn't see any of them yet in this book.
Yeah, not in this one. Yeah, so like even before this series, it was like it's been quite ominous. It's like we've had like loads of bits and bobs here and there. But with like Lady Stoneheart, like she was only in the one chapter, and I'm already more scared of her than I am of any of the other antagonists, to be honest. Because I don't really know what to expect from her. Because she, as you said, she's stone-hearted. She's putting her vengeance before anything else. That means that she'll be so blinded by rage that anything could happen to people that we love. It's like Brienne and Podrick and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm scared of her. I'm really scared. And I really wish she was in the show now. I really do.
I think that is one of...
Oh, sorry. I was going to say,
ahead,
at the end of the chapter, do we think that the word that she screamed, do we think that she was like, yeah, I'll do it,
Sword.
I guess, kill Jamie for Lady Stoneheart, or agreeing to that?
Sword. Because Lady Stoneheart said to her, sword or noose. And she didn't want to do either. So she was already had a noose around her neck, so there wasn't really any other choice for her other than to say sword. But obviously, I don't think Brienne's obviously going to do what she's saying that she's going to do. I think she's going to find her own way to essentially make Stoneheart calm down.
Do something dishonorable,
exactly.
maybe, perhaps?
It is dishonorable. It's going against her word, but it's to save her life. And that's just probably bringing Sansa or Arya into the picture. And obviously, we never find out how that turns out in the show. So it's going to be very intriguing to see how that turns out in the books.
I'm really interested. So is Lady Stoneheart in Dance with Dragons at all?
I don't remember, to be honest.
I know Brienne is in Dance with Dragons, but I don't remember Lady Stoneheart being in there.
Okay. Oh, I'm really interested now.
I don't know. Yeah, you might get it from other people's perspectives, just like talking about what. Yeah, because Jamie's in A Dance of Dragons, so you might hear things like while he's in the Riverlands about what she's doing, but not direct perspectives. I don't think.
When I was watching like loads of theory videos on Game of Thrones, because like every time I watched a season, like I got really into it. A lot, like one of the big things that people were complaining about is that Lady Stoneheart was never in the show. But obviously the creators of the TV show have known all along, or at least for a decent amount of time, how the story was going to end on their end. And they had that information from George R.R. Martin, like the main plot points, which leads me to believe that Lady Stoneheart may just become kind of irrelevant Like I've noticed, I was reading Feast for Crows, and I was reading some things that I know will later on become kind of irrelevant and only play into the plot in like a very small part. And I was thinking about how George R.R. Martin is really into telling the story as opposed to just getting the story from one place to another. But there are like a lot of things, like he'll go on for chapters and chapters with one character, and then nothing that character does really ever amounts to anything in the grand scheme of the main plot points that we know. But then again, obviously there will be a lot more content in the books than there ever was in the show. So we've talked about Gavin, stop it with the eyebrows. we talked about Brienne and Lady Stoneheart. Anybody have anything to say on the Ironborn?
To be honest, it went.
I know, Rach, you said that you were interested in the chapter where they had the Kingsmoot. I think I was interested in the first chapter, which was the one, was it the Droned Prophet or something, the first Ironborn chapter? And then nothing else I really was interested in.
Yeah, I think that I kind of share the sentiment there. I first liked it when they were trying to like vie for who was going to be like the king, and I find it like relatively interesting there, especially you've got Asha, and I like her narrative, but ultimately those were some of the chapters also that later on I was just kind of skimming through because I don't care about however you say his name. Auron.
Victarion
and Euron. Oh,
Euron.
Yeah. Euron.
You're on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't care because also I do feel as though I know where all that's going. So I wasn't interested, basically. I don't have much more to give on that one, I'm sorry.
And then to parallel them, we have the Sand Snakes.
Yes, tell us about the Sand Snakes.
I don't really have much to say about them in general, aside from that I just was really interested in their chapters. I did find in some places, because we are pretty much being introduced to a new setting that we've never been in before, where we have the same kind of people we have in every other place, but because we've never been there before, like we're not familiar with like who the stewards are and who the guards are, etc., like we are everywhere else. So I was finding it a little bit difficult to follow in some places, just getting used to everybody's names. And I'm pretty sure he is called Aerys Oakhart, isn't he? Like I forgot that he was ever a Kingsguard because it was ages ago that Marcella left to go to Dawn. But I definitely find the dynamics of these Sand Snakes interesting, and I really like them in the show as well. But just everything that's kind of going on with them, I just like them as characters and what they're doing. But I was definitely more interested in them than I was the Iron Islands, even though it's kind of, they're both kind of the same. They're doing the same thing, just with two different sets of people. Anybody else like the Sand Snakes? Oh, God, Zaf.
I think the one of the main reasons I feel like the Dawn is so intriguing is like, unlike the Iron Islands, the way they view so many things is so different. The way bastards are accepted, marriage, this, that, and the other. So it's a completely different culture compared to the very stereotypical Eurocentric medieval kind of place setting that we've had essentially everywhere else. So I think that was pretty intriguing. And then also it's like, we don't have as much concern for what's happening in the Iron Islands because there's not really much love there. There's not that much love between Asha and Theon, and there wasn't really much love between Asha and her now dead father, this, that, and the other. But when we come to the Dawn plotline, there is so much love and loss, and you can understand, a lot of perspectives. You can understand Prince Doran, it was trial by combat, this, that, and the other. But it doesn't change the fact that now there is a hole in these girls' hearts, missing their father. There is the people missing their prince. So there's just I feel like you just resonate so much more deeply with that storyline because there's just so many angles that even on a most humane level that we can understand. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I also liked how we've always gotten we never had a first person perspective from Dorne. We've always heard about Dorne, and we always thought okay, Dorne is kind of more submissive when it comes to the kingdoms. They're not going to do anything. And then we kind of learn over the course of the book that that's not necessarily the case, that Doran has a lot of patience and he has been plotting an epic revenge from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really enjoyed the sand snakes. Not so much in the show. I thought they butchered them in the show. So I'm really excited for those who haven't read the books to read the next one.
I think one of the reasons that I really like the Sand Snakes and everything that happens in Dawn is that I think of all of the characters that we have read from and read about, I think that Oberyn was one of the most charismatic characters that we have encountered in the entire series. And I also think if you think about relatability, the Dornish are a lot more flamboyant, so we can relate to them a lot more than we can relate to the rest of Westeros, which has a heavy like the Seven is representative of Christianity in the way that people like the religious structure and things like that. So that's very much like a medieval like cities controlled by religion, whereas Dawn is a lot more like modern culture to me, where they're very open with their sexuality and like they can have sex with who they want to. They don't have to be married. And as you said, they accept bastards and things like that. So I think everything that's going on in Dawn is a lot more relatable, which is why I like them. And then we had the wonderful and sadly dead Red Viper, who was one of my favorite characters ever in both the show and the book.
I feel like it is also like the bitterness of the Red Viper story is essentially of a hero who was so close, but it was his own hubris that let him down. And that's essentially a tale as old as time, and it is quite beautifully done. But the repercussions of that's where the Dawn story is actually really, really intriguing. People think that, oh, it's so sad this character didn't get to whatever. He was a prince and this, and he had such an honor, like he had such an honorable reason to fight, but he let himself down. And in turn kind of let everything down and got everything so much worse than it had to be. So it's kind of sad his legacy ended up being that. Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, no, I just kind of had like a mini brainwave about what we were talking about in terms of the books and how we've split them in terms of the characters, and we're seeing this the first time with this one, but then of course in the next one that we're going to be reading, we do see Tyrion and Jon come back, and of course it's Dany. Do you think that potentially George did this in order to create some kind of sides, in order to get in our minds Tyrion and Jon and Dany working together, and to lay those, even though they're not together at that point, and even though they're not working together, he split them up at this point to create that divide in our minds? I don't know.
Possibly. You never know with George. You never know.
Like I feel like because the next one is the last one that's published, we can't say for sure.
No.
But it's definitely, that's not something that I've thought about before, because obviously those three storylines at this present moment are very separate.
Sorry about that. What I was just going to say is I feel like the main thing, obviously Tyrion's storyline is very entwined with Dany's storyline, but we're not becoming privy to Dany's storyline, so Tyrion couldn't be part of this narrative in this half of the narratives. But so we know those two are really entwined, but Jon's storyline mirrors Dany's story. Their stories are so similar. The progressions they make are also very, very similar, and that's why there is a level of equality and relatability between them that no other characters in the stories have. So that's why I feel like you can't detach their stories and essentially split them. Like, let's say even if Jon was in this one and Dany's in the next one, it'd be nice that our two main protagonists aren't present, but it does still it's important that they're in the same story together, because whatever Dany is doing has implications, especially to Jon. You know, as we said, they are the ones with the biggest stakes, but they are also mirrors of each other. It's just what they do with this extra power they have, this shared. But I was going to spoil. Am I allowed to say it?
I don't think there's anybody in the chat, as far as I'm aware, who hasn't seen the show. But if you want to segue, does anybody have anything non-spoilery to say before Zach continues?
No.
Okay, so now we'll segue into anything that has impact on seasons 5 to 8 of Game of Thrones. So if you have not seen seasons 5 to 8, then Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you had a great time discussing this book. But Zach's going to ruin everything if you stay.
Not too much. All I was going to say is just like the implications of their shared bloodline.
Yeah.
It links them in a way that, like, you know, we're seeing so many complex relationships. So we're exploring, you know, age dynamics, incest. But when it comes most crucially to the bloodline, which essentially defined the realm, that detachment from the realm, because this story takes place in the realm, their stories don't. So that detachment, I feel like, is definitely very implicit, as you were saying, to just establishing the similarity of their characters and also the cluelessness of the populace of Westeros.
I can't wait for y'all to read the next one. This is where you're really going to start to notice the differences between the show.
I think it's definitely creeping in now.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It gets even better. But now that I'm thinking about it, because I always liked A Dance of Dragons more than A Feast for Crows. But now that I'm thinking about all the chapters of like who I like the least, like I really, even though I'm a big Jon fan, his chapters aren't the most exciting. Dany's, especially in the last time we saw her, not that exciting. Who else do we get? Tyrion. I love Tyrion, but the way that his story goes, not the most interesting in my opinion. So I'm like, oh, am I really going to like this? It might feel the way that most people felt about A Feast for Crows. We shall see.
So A Dance with Dragons is definitely our next one that's available, and then there's not another one in this storyline. Is that right?
There is only Fire and Blood if we want to do Fire and Blood, but that is the start of a new series. Technically, it's the history of the last 300 years of Targaryen.
Part 1.
That's actually where the new TV show, the prequel series, is kind of going to settle in a bit more.
Yes, is that the one that they've just announced?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's going to be on the previous Targaryen lineages. And if I may say so myself,
as a Targaryen,
I personally don't agree with it. I think that's a terrible idea, especially after what they've done. And I'm not happy. And I love the story. I love the world. I love all of that. But I do not trust another adaptation of George's work, especially when there is not raw source material to directly take things from. Because yes, this is source material, but it is spread out amongst lots and lots of people and time periods and whatnot. So personally, I'm against it. I'll watch it and I'll love it, but I'll hate watching it.
The only adaptation I want is the one we're never going to get, and I want like an epic historical romance of Rhaegar and Lyanna.
We're not going to.
Yeah, it's like the same reason that J.K. Rowling is probably never going to do the Marauders unless that's what she's decided to do now. But it's just too close to the real storyline.
Please God, don't let her do it. She will do
Sue me, but J.K. is money hungry, so she most likely will when like that Harry Potter money, like she needs some more of it. When it comes to Rhaegar and Lyanna, I think the implicitness of their story is what was the big plot point, and was advocated for the cluelessness of everyone, like especially with the story of Lyanna being such a good badass fighter, and then Rhaegar knowing that about her and all that stuff, and it's such a beautiful story that we'll never get to know.
I'm just sad about Rhaegar in general. Like, he seems like, obviously we will never know because we don't get a first-hand perspective from him, but he seems like one of the genuinely good characters in this world. Like, he was a good guy and he was done so damn dirty because of his dad and because of Robert. And I just want his story. Like, I want, like, because obviously the end of that story, he's gonna like just punch you in the gut, and I need that. I need things to hurt me like that, and I know that would hurt me.
But we're forgetting that Rhaegar also left his wife and his children for Lyanna.
100%. Rhaegar is not the best person.
Even though I'm totally down to see that. Like, I'm there.
But in terms of Game of Thrones, like, that's just commonplace. Like, nobody's faithful to their spouses anyway, apart from Ned and Catelyn.
And I feel like there's more to the story as well to that. I think that they said that maybe even though they were married, that it was
it's like a political marriage.
It was kind of arranged agreement, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is what most of the marriages are like in this world, which is why I wouldn't be bothered.
It was one of the ways to make the Dornish subservient to the Targaryen rule. And when it's like, yeah, Rhaegar's a fucking absolute sweetheart. Regardless of that, though, Percy. Actually, no, even including that, because he was just doing his duty. But when you take into account the last thing, I'm getting so emotional. The last thing Rhaegar said to Jaime was that he was going to make some changes when he comes back. And his love for Lyanna was genuine love. He knew her, who she truly was. He knew she was a strong, capable woman. And he wasn't like a lot of other men who would essentially reduce strong, capable women, or, you know, say that, oh, you're being too masculine, or you did it. Like, he accepted her fully for who she was. And so that is just the biggest tragedy of the entire story. And I feel like when you essentially find out the fact that he's essentially about to go against his father's regime, and it was Robert's jealousy and Ned is not faultless here. But my biggest issue is everyone saying that Eddard, oh my God, he was so good, he was so honorable. No, Eddard kept his mouth shut when he should have told Robert, she's just not that into you, bro. But no, he was like, oh, okay, I see.
Did Ned know at the time? I thought Ned only found out afterwards when he went to the tower.
Yeah, but the issue was he didn't know that Lyanna didn't like Rob. Like, you know, he knew that Lyanna didn't like Rob the way Rob liked Lyanna.
Okay.
He was under the same impression that Lyanna was kidnapped by Rhaegar and and then obviously found out that they were in love when that happened. However, he knew that Lyanna did not like Rob the way Rob liked Lyanna. And that's where it's just so annoying. Like, that's your sister. You're allowed to be possessive. This is the one instance you're allowed to be like, that's my sister. That's like a no-go zone, bro.
Especially because he went to war on the basis of Robert thinking that Lyanna had been stolen from him.
And exactly. So the entire war started because of essentially Robert's jealousy. Not facts, but Robert's jealousy, and that's where it's just like a big fat eye roll. And I can't.
There is the fact though that they couldn't have been together because Rhaegar is married and Lyanna was promised to Robert, and Rhaegar had a wife and kids, and his father was mental and would have killed Lyanna. So there is that.
Yeah, but there is also the idea that I'm pretty sure they said that the marriage between him and his other wife was annulled. So the marriage between him and Lyanna was legitimate. And that's why Jon isn't a bastard. And that's why he was the actual rightful heir to the throne.
Okay, y'all. I love y'all so much, but my husband has made me lunch.
Okay.
So food, unfortunately, has to take priority.
I don't blame you. I'm hungry.
Understandable.
But last look at the cute boy.
Just leave the camera on him. It's fine.
Right. Well, he'll follow me because he knows that food scraps will happen. All right. See y'all later.
Bye.
Gotta figure out how to leave.
Okay. So anything else regarding the show, the latter end of the show?
Can I just ask, in terms of like the sand snakes and all that, and Marcella, what the hell what happened? Because I'm confused.
In this book, because I haven't finished it, so I don't know where it ends.
Zaf, like they were on a boat, I think, maybe not, because I was like very confused.
Is it where Ilaria kisses her and sends her away?
No,
sorry,
like
see yourself for a moment. Hold on.
They were ambushed, and yeah, all those, like the whole chapters just completely like went over my head. I read them and I didn't really know what was going on or who we were speaking to. But I knew that Marcella was there, and then somebody betrayed them, and then they were ambushed. And then the woman who was running it all, she was pulled away, and she was just she said that the people knew what she was meant to be doing, but she was betrayed. Is that
right? So the oh my god, what's
Arya?
Ariana takes Marcella to go and crown her, but Doran finds out about it, and they get ambushed by the boat.
Yes.
That bit. That's the last thing I read from them.
One where it ends with Prince Doran saying, "I'll give them what they want: fire and blood."
Yes, maybe.
Okay, because that's in reference to Targaryens. I think he's saying to, like, because I don't know if he knows Tywin's dead yet at that point, but he's essentially saying that he's going to give Tywin Lannister what he wants. What he wants is fire and blood. Fire and blood is also in reference to Targaryens because that's the actual Targaryen family word.
Yeah.
So it's like, I will give you the Targaryens. I feel like he's saying that, but he could potentially literally be saying destruction. Though obviously I think it's the implicit meaning Targaryens. Because I think he's done with the corruption going on here that he's dealing with, because he's trying to like stay on Tywin's good side and he's too scared.
So was Marcella killed?
In this, I have not got that far in this one.
I think so, no.
I'll maybe ask the internet, because I couldn't figure out that one. Because then also Cersei certainly wasn't told if she was.
I know how it happens in the show. It's Ilaria Sand comes back and sends Marcella back to King's Landing, but she kisses her and she's got poison on her lips, and Marcella dies before she gets there. But I think at that point Jaime's gone to Dawn to collect Marcella, and he's there when she dies, and Jaime's not in Dawn. He's in the Riverlands at the minute, I think. But that's my Munchkin Blue has just said Doran is the mastermind. He's plotting to re-establish the Targs. Because at this point, Daenerys is like a huge rumor, isn't she? Like everyone's... It's weird because there's people who are saying, yeah, there's definitely dragons. And then there's a lot of other people saying, no, she's... there's no dragons. It's not real. Everyone's lying. So it's interesting to see who believes that and who doesn't.
Yeah, I've just read this from the internet, and it said, in the novels, Marcella Baratheon is sent to Dawn to marry Trystane Martell, the same as on the show. Accompanying her is the King's Guard, Aris Oakhart, but Jorah Martell has two other children who are both older, Quentin, who was sent to Meereen to negotiate the marriage pact with Dany, and Arianne, who's his oldest and his heir. Arianne ends up sort of playing the role of Ilaria Sand on the show, and she's apparently a shit stirrer. And she begins an affair with Oakhart and convinces him to go into plot with her to crown Marcella as the queen. Since by the Dornish rules, Marcella is ahead of Tommen in the line. Oh yeah, I remember that conversation. She's talking to Marcella, and she's saying that you would actually be queen. And she said, yeah, but Tommen's...
saying it belongs to Tommen.
Yeah, because he's a boy. And yeah. So the idea is to pit Marcella versus Tommen and their respective supporters against each other. But then, of course, they're ambushed. And it doesn't say that she's dead. It said that it's kind of presumed that potentially she's killed, but that there's no evidence about that. It's still up in the air.
Zaf, does Ilaria Sand come back, or does Arianne Martell take her place?
Hello?
Hi.
Does Ilaria Sand come back, and does
Arianne Martell take her place as like from the narrative of the show?
I'll be honest, I don't remember. I'm pretty because like they just did it differently, like because they did an entire double plot here with Marcella. Yeah. They did it so at this point in time when we finish also with Dance of Dragons, we are clueless as to whether it's the double that's alive and Marcella's somewhere else, or if Marcella's alive and there is a double. So that's where I can't fully verify, because it's just something that they've never actually got to the point to be able to clarify. So with the Marcella thing, that's where I stand. And then with the Ilaria thing, it's just like it was all more so her daughters rather than a grand mastermind, if I remember correctly, who's actually orchestrating the entire thing. But I think they just wanted to make it easier with a figurehead and more easily digestible.
Yeah, because I know I have like a really nerdy Game of Thrones card game, and I don't think I have a card for Ilaria Sand, but I do have one for Arianne Martell, so I don't feel like Ilaria Sand is as big a deal in the books as she's in the show.
I think they just did that so there is someone to kind of orchestrate and illustrate the entire story way more easily. Like, for example, in the book, the three daughters are seen as very, very different with different traits, right? But in the TV show, they just have different weapons. They're essentially the same character.
Yeah. So they're all Obara, essentially.
Exactly. So I feel like what they were just trying to do is just make it more easily digestible to a TV audience by making
there's also more sand snakes as well. There's 5 in the book, isn't there? Because there's Larisa and I don't remember what the really small one is, but there's 5, I think.
And we go kind of more so into, like just the Dornish view upon things, the exoticism and the fact that they are so ostracized from the rest of the Westerosi community is so better communicated here. Meanwhile, in the TV show, it's like, oh, by the way, there's this place where there's actually brown people in Westeros. I know you probably didn't think so, but haha, I fooled you.
Oh, it's interesting as well because in the show, all of the sand snakes are dark skinned, but in the book, only Obara is dark skinned. Nehemia, is it Nehemia? Is light skinned with dark hair, and Tyene is light haired and light skinned. Which in the show they all look the same.
They are essentially all bastards, but I think they were trying to relate it a bit more easier. That like I'm trying to make it a bit more easier again for the lowest common denominator to be able to understand. These are the exotic people. They bang everyone, you know. Which I feel like that is kind of. There is definitely a conversation that needs to be had about how racialized and animalistic and sexualized non-white people are in the show, and how they are essentially seen as essentially being more brutal and stuff like that. You can easily compare that to the entirety of the East, and especially Dawn, because Dawn fits in way more with the East, because when you actually even look at the map of Westeros and Essos and all that, there used to be a long ass bit of land that connected Dawn to the East. So that's how you can see a lot of integration with similar cultures, especially to Bravos and stuff like that. But then that destroyed geographically over time and stuff like that. So it's just kind of like there's already this sense of detachment that they probably were just trying to make easier to be able to identify.
Makes sense. I've lost my sheet of paper again. I think we've covered everything that I had notes for. Are there any last points before we wrap this up?
Daenerys Targaryen deserves better. There we go.
I agree.
Wait,
I think we all agree on that one.
What?
We all agree with you.
What? Who deserved to die?
Nobody. What? I think
No,
Rachel said. I don't know. Nobody said deserved apart from you.
Oh no, I said Daenerys Targaryen deserved better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying. That's all
Yeah,
I have
she definitely
to say.
did. And so did Rhaegar Targaryen. All of the Targaryens, apart from the Mad King.
Was he really mad though?
Okay, let's pause. Aemon. Okay, no. So the tree dude, the three-eyed raven guy, Maester Aemon, Rhaegar, and Daenerys are the only Targaryens who deserve rights.
But would Viserys have turned out the way that he had if he hadn't have had to grow up on the run without parents?
True, but he acted like a plonker, so I don't care.
That is true. Like, the story is better without him.
Mm-hmm.
Are we all happy to wrap up then?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is it for the Feast for Crows live show. We will be back at the end of November sometime for Dance with Dragons. And at that point, we should know if we're doing Fire and Blood. And then we'll let you know where we're going from there. But, sorry, I'm just reading the chat. Yeah, thank you all for joining us. I hope you all enjoyed the live show, and I hope you enjoyed the book. And we will all see you again, hopefully with Cody and Sophie.
Nice nails.
And yeah, we'll see you at the end of November.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
This thing.